goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you all. Thank you. It is certainly an honor to be here with you this morning. And before I start with remarks, I want to thank some people too. I especially want to thank, and I know you'll want to join with me in thanking, Mr. Mike Bobby and Dr. Lisa Herring for the leadership they provided in the interviewing months for those here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, some folks went to a lot of trouble to make today possible for us, so we know they're probably behind the scenes. You can recognize them easily. They have light-colored pants and those black shirts on. They have their MeWe shirts on. If you get a chance throughout the day to thank them for all the work they obviously did to put everything together for us this morning, please do. They do a fantastic job. There's a lot that brings us together this morning. One of the most important things that we're united on, though, is in our vision of what we together can do for our children. We can think about the importance of vision if we consider this story of a noted biologist who took caterpillars and he lined them one right behind the other around the rim of a bowl. Near that bowl, he set a tray of mulberry leaves, supposedly that species of caterpillar's favorite food. Then he went back and he nudged one of the caterpillars forward. It began moving round and round the rim of the bowl, and all the caterpillars followed for 3 days and nights until they all died. We can learn 3 lessons from that experiment. First of all, the caterpillars followed a leader who lacked a vision of what they needed to thrive. Secondly, they were so busy, they confused activity with progress. And third, because they lacked vision and weren't able to discern the difference between doing lots of work and making progress, they missed the miracle of metamorphosis. We don't want to miss the miracle of metamorphosis for our children. We want to think carefully about where we want to go and how we'll get there. If we were to articulate a vision for our children, it might go something like this. We want our children to know what courage is. We want them to know what is noble and what is base. We want them to know what deserves to be loved and what deserves to be defended. We want them to know the difference between ambition and greed, loyalty and servitude, liberty and license. We want them to know how mountains are made and that for almost every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. We want them to know about subjects and predicates, isosceles triangles and ellipses. We want them to know where the Amazon flows, what the First Amendment means. We want them to know about the Donner Party and slavery, Shylock, Hercules, and Abigail Adams. We want them to know where Ethiopia is and why there was once a Berlin Wall. We want them to know how a poem works, how a plant works, and what, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride, means. We want them to know the place of the Milky Way and the miracle of DNA and the unfolding of the universe. We want them to know about the Convention of 1787, and we also want them to know about the conventions of good behavior. We want them to know what the Sistine Chapel looks like, what good music sounds like, and what it takes to be emotionally healthy and physically fit. We want them to be able to come together and collaborate in solving meaningful problems that make a difference for themselves, for their employers, for their community, and for the lives of others. It isn't until we bring all of our children to such high levels of accomplishment that we've met our role of delivering in America equity, justice, and human dignity. It's that vision that brings us together. What holds us together is our commitment. We are united by our commitment to serve kids. You know, it's a funny thing about commitments. It's pretty easy to make a commitment. It's much harder to keep it. Pretty easy to make a commitment, much harder to keep it. That point is illustrated by a Texas cowboy who moved to Montana. He went into a bar at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Montana, and he ordered 3 beers. And the bartender brought him 3 beers. He drank the 3 beers. The next day he came in to the bar at 5 o'clock and he ordered 3 beers. The bartender brought him 3 beers, and he said, you know, I could bring you these beers one at a time, and that way they'd all be cold. He said, no. You see, I have 2 brothers back in Texas. The 3 of us have been really, really close all of our lives, but I had to move to Montana to work. We agreed in order to sort of keep that connection, we would all, at 5 o'clock every day, go into the bar and we'd have 3 beers, and that would be a way of keeping us together. So this went on for several weeks, and the patrons became used to that habit. One day, the cowboy came in and he just ordered 2 beers. And no one knew quite what to say. And after a few moments, the bartender went over and he said, I'm really sorry about your loss. And the cowboy said, loss? Oh, he said, no, there's been no loss. My wife and I joined the First Baptist Church yesterday, so I'm not drinking, but it hasn't affected my brother's behavior. To keep most commitments, it means that we're inconvenienced. The point of a commitment is that it requires some sort of change, right? Because if it's comfortable and we're doing it, we don't need to think about it or commit to it necessarily. What we want to do right now is watch a video of 2 students. These 2 students are starting a brand new school year, and they're pretty excited about the possibility. I want you to listen and watch for 3 things as you watch this short video clip. Watch the 2 students, listen for them expressing hope that they're really going to be successful this time. Watch them as they prepare for the first examination. And then watch to see how carefully the teacher checks for understanding. Watch to see if the teacher assures that the students understand what they have learned to date before moving on to the next operation. Can you do those 3 things? Watch for hope, watch for the students preparing for the exam, and watch for the teacher to check for understanding. Okay, here we go.
Department.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the candy will pass by on this conveyor belt and continue into the next room where the girls will pack it. Now, your job is to take each piece of candy and wrap it in one of these papers and then put it back on the belt. You understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll! Let her roll! Well, wait here. Somebody's asleep at the switch.
What are you doing up here? I thought you were downstairs boxing chocolates.
Oh, they kicked me out of there fast.
Why?
I kept pinching them to see what kind they were. This is the 4th department I've been in.
Oh, I didn't do so well either. No.
All right, girls. Now, this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll!
Oh, this is easier. Yeah, we can handle this okay.
great, huh? I like that. Every single time I watch it, I'm just... And that's what it's going to be like in a couple of weeks for some of our kids, right? They come back, they think, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to do this year, and all of a sudden, things are going much too quickly, and they're left behind. It's a funny thing. I've used that video for years, and every single time I use it with teachers, they come up afterwards and they say, Gerrita, you're wrong. Lucy and Ethel aren't students. They're teachers in our system. Right? So we have to acknowledge that the system we inherited was never, ever designed to bring all children to high levels of learning. It wasn't. We keep working harder and harder and harder to make it work for us. Policymakers at the local, state, and federal level get concerned about the worrisome outcomes for some of our children, and so they keep regulating and ratcheting the system down tighter and tighter and tighter, when in fact the system has to be changed. We have to commit to making the system work for kids. Form and function are misaligned. We have to think very, very carefully about what it is that will work to bring all of our children to high levels of learning. Many years ago, an effective schools researcher, Ron Edmonds, who was at the University of Michigan and then Harvard, responded to a Coleman study. The Coleman study tended to say, or people thought that it said, that the home background has such an incredible impact on learning that schools can't make a difference with poor children. He's famous for starting what was called the effective schools movement. He said, how many effective schools would you have to see to be convinced, persuaded of the educability of poor children? He went on to say, if your answer is more than one, then I suggest you have reasons of your own for believing that some children can't learn. He said, we can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. Right? Some of you know this by heart. We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. Whether or not we do so must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't done it so far. That's the challenge we face today, and that's the commitment we have to make together. In order to get there, there are some big ideas, I think, that we can keep in mind. The first one is this whole notion of growth mindset. Intelligence, we now know, is not a fixed asset. It grows over time. The mind is malleable. When exposed to the right kinds of environments, our intelligence increases throughout our lifetimes. We become more capable learners, smarter, we see more deeply, we make more connections. But the amount of connections we make, the depth of our understanding, depends on the environments that we're provided. So the first big idea is intelligence isn't fixed, it's malleable, and we can help kids become much more capable than they are in terms of their ability to learn if we provide the right kinds of environments and supports. The second big idea is that scope and sequence charts, scope and sequence patterns are patterns that adults made up. About 25% of human beings learn well in the organization we have, in sort of the bell curve organization. Those 25% enjoy that organization, and we go out, we go to college, and we come back, and we come into the organization, and we think this is the way it will work. In fact, there are developmental continuum that start at the early stages of life, and there are now scientists working to tell us what those big stepping stones are and the sequence in which most kids make them. If we can figure out where a child is on the developmental continuum, whether it's in language or mathematics or on the way to self-control, and we respond correctly, then we provide the kind of environment that's needed for the child to move on through the continuum. So that's different than age grade designation, and it doesn't mean we can start Monday morning doing something differently, but it means we have to work our way there, and we have to understand how impossible it is when we ask teachers to personalize and differentiate in our current structure. They can do a lot and we can do a lot, but as leaders, we have to commit to rethinking the structure for them. The third big idea is the idea of rapid correction cycles. All of us learn as we see what didn't work, and then we adjust that and move on. Teachers are masters of understanding with a fine-grained intuition and knowledge where kids are getting hung up, and their job is to respond in ways that keep kids moving forward, almost like a GPS system. The fourth big idea is every quarter in this system, we're going to pause. We're going to see where the progress every child has made during that quarter, the progress every teacher has made during that quarter, the progress every school has made during the quarter, the progress the district has made during the quarter, and we're going to respond where needed to make the changes we need to make to ensure that we keep the pathways open and we keep kids moving forward on them. That's going to take us a little bit of time to learn to do, but it's what we absolutely have to do if we're committed to kids. It also means that at the district level, we have to rethink the way we're organized. We have to put schools in the middle of our thoughts every day. We're not a regulatory agency, we're a service agency. And schools with a single point of contact representing elementary, middle, and secondary principals will connect with all of the needed services at the district office in order to get exactly what is needed to deliver instruction and support, both for teachers and for kids. So all of us have to commit to rethinking differently. And I want to pause here for just a moment and thank all of you, the many of you, who've been impacted by some changes we've made in the few days I've been on the job. We've said until further notice, we're asking you to be utility players or pinch hitters, and we really appreciate your willingness to do that until we can get school open and let things settle down and then talk together about what makes sense. So thank you very much for that. All of us come together then thinking about our organization, how to put schools in the center so schools can put kids in the center of their enterprise. It means that all of us bring to this work a servant's heart. We are united through our service to all of the children throughout Charleston County. Service is a choice we make every single day. We make it every single moment. Choice. Every single moment we choose how we're going to respond to situations, whether we're going to escalate them or de-escalate them, whether we're going to help or whether we're going to hurt, whether we're going to respond in ways that really move a conversation or an action forward or respond in ways that cause us to continue this intense focus we have had on issues of adults. It's a choice we make. Many years ago, I was a runner, and my grandmother came quite a distance to spend a week with me in the summer. So it was a hot July day. I was getting ready to run, and my grandmother said, "Why do you do this? This is not something we did in my generation. I don't understand this." And I said, "Well, Grandma, I'm kind of getting it to the age of midlife, and I guess people in midlife sort of have crises. And they do something like buy a flashy, expensive foreign sports car that they can't really afford, or become involved in an extramarital flirtation, or sort of become obsessive and compulsive about something, and I guess that's what I've done about running." My tiny little, highly religious grandmother looked at me just a moment, and she said, "Dear, of the alternatives you've described, I believe you've made the worst possible choice." How privileged we are to live in a country where we have so many choices. We get to choose what we want to eat. We get to choose our leisure activities. We get to choose where we want to spend our day off. It's humbling to imagine for just a moment all the human beings in the world who have none of those choices. Viktor Frankl, as a Jew, was incarcerated in concentration camps in World War II. He said that they were made to do very degrading things, sometimes lick chicken droppings from the floor. When he was near starvation and his cheekbones were protruding because his cheeks the flesh had sunken so much, he forced himself to break off small pieces of the bread they were given and to share those pieces with his cellmates. He said that that simple act of service, of selflessness, was the one thing that kept him sane. It's the one thing he could identify that separated him from his captors. Later, he would write a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he says, the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. The last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what I think distinguishes a leader. Leaders choose to keep their eye on the long game. They choose to concentrate, focus on the vision. They choose to commit when it's inconvenient and not at all what they wanted for themselves. And they choose to serve. They make the choice to inconvenience themselves for others. It's really an honor to be with all of you who have made this commitment to kids, who've made this commitment to Charleston County and the greater communities within it. I'd like to close with what I can remember of my grandfather's favorite poem about an elderly gentleman who had a vision and made a commitment. When I think of the violin in this poem, I think of one of our children whom others might not view as having great potential. Here's how the poem goes. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to spend much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks, he cried. Who'll start the bidding for me? $1? $1 who'll make it $2. $2 who'll make it $3. $3 once, $3 twice. Going and gone. But no, a gray-haired man from way back of the room came forward and picked up the bow. Wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening up the strings, he played a melody pure and sweet, soft as an angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer said, in a voice that could be heard by all, now what am I bidding for the old violin? And the people reconsidered what they saw. 1,000, 1,000, who make it 2, 2,000, who make it 3, 3,000 once, 3,000 twice. Going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but someone said, I do not understand. What changed its worth? Swift came the reply, the touch of a master's hand. As you move forward, working with teachers next week and students the week after, my prayer for each of you, for all of us, is that we're blessed with the touch of a master's hand. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. There are various ways to demonstrate commitment. We have among us today a lady who has given 47 years commitment to Charleston County Schools, and she is returning as a principal. She's continuing in that role, so we've asked Jane Davis to come up and lead our principals. She'll call the new principals up, and she's going to lead all the principals in the room in our commitment, our pledge of service, of vision, of commitment, of success for our kids. Jane?